Hello and welcome back to session 3. So as promised, let's jump straight into your first formal movement or your first formal technique, which is your introduction to priming. So as we recently discussed in session 2, priming is the setup. Classically, it's the pre-talk, but I want to move our attention into how we're going to look at priming because our priming system gives us a little bit more robustness than the classical pre-talk. The priming itself, as we said, is just the setup. We're going to warm our clients up to the session, also warm our clients up to us, if you will, but we're going to let them know about everything as far as possibilities, about what hypnosis will feel like, be like, and what possible outcomes could come about as a result of ending the session or having a session with us formally. Now, this is important. Our clients are coming in feeling certain things, especially the way that society looks at hypnosis. They tend to look a little bit scary. It's like mind control. It's as if we're going to create hypnotic zombies from people, which is far from the truth. So our clients are going to come up with or come into our sessions, either formally or informally, with some insecurities. So what priming does is put their mind at ease. It puts them at ease consciously to let them know we're not going to hurt them or take advantage of them. But also what it does, it allows the unconscious mind to do something very, very important for us as hypnotists, which we'll look at in a moment. Our priming, just think about it, is the warm-up. It's the stretching of the mind. To discuss what the unconscious mind is going to be doing while we're priming our clients, before we look at formally how we do this or what this is all about, I want to give you this acronym to play with, just for priming itself. There are two ways of which hypnosis can go. It's either good or it's either bad. I don't want to complicate it any more than that. I want you to imagine in your mind, or even write this down or draw this down, two bubbles. The bubble on the left-hand side is where hypnosis goes fantastically. Everything the client needs represents that bubble. Everything they want to feel, all the goods and all the great things about what hypnosis can do, is formally represented in that bubble on the left. On the right-hand side, that right-hand bubble is where hypnosis goes pear-shaped. It's where it's difficult, it's where it's challenging, it might be where it scares a client. It's all the bad things that hypnosis has either thought about or what the pear-shaped things that hypnosis can occur during a formal session. That's represented in that right-hand bubble. So we have two choices here. We can either set up a session to run as smoothly as possible and to allow the unconscious mind to set up this session before we formally get into it with our priming solution, our priming system, or we can skip all that and just hope that the right bubble our client falls into has everything they need. Now, thinking about that, I know which one I would rather choose. I would rather set up the right trance bubble, if you will, so when my client goes into this hypnotic state, they leave the conscious world and enter this unconscious void, if you will, that I know everything that's inside this bubble is going to look after them and it has everything I need as a therapist that I can rely on when I do my therapy. Now, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. What I can rely on as a therapist, so when I do my therapy intervention, that's going to become crucial a little bit later. Rather than just hoping my client will go into trance and get what they need out of it, hoping they'll go into trance and they'll be safe in hypnosis, or just hoping they'll go into trance and they'll have a fun and exciting time. I don't want to leave things up to hope. I just don't want to cross my fingers and cross my toes that they'll go to the good place. I would rather set it up accordingly, but also set it up for everything I can rely on as a hypnotist. So just imagine that acronym, if you will, two ways to go into trance. It's either good or it's either bad. So let's look at the good. If our priming was the setup, we would tend to do this as our first part of the interaction. So let me give you the highlights of this. Clients come into your office, you've done all the formal paperwork with them, they've given you coherent signatures to say yes, they want to be hypnotized, you've maybe taken your payment, you've done all the little formal things you need to do as a hypnotist. So then it's time to get started. Your client's sitting in their chair, you're sitting in their chair, you're ready to go. So this is where the priming comes into place. Your priming is to set up the first part of the session, and that's actually the usual first part of a formal interaction. Now, if you remember back to the ABSU formula, what did the A stand for? Attention. So look at this priming sequence as getting your client's attention, meaning that we're not jumping straight into our hypnotic routine and having our client look at us in the eyes and acting all hypnotic and jumping straight into your techniques. We're not there yet. That could be too forceful, a little bit too full on, and a little bit too quick for our clients. I want you to imagine this as a scenario. Let's say you're the client. You've never had a hypnosis session before, but maybe you've seen on TV, on the stage hypnosis shows, people can act a little bit silly when they're under hypnosis, or you've got some sort of irrational fear about hypnosis, or possibly you've even been hypnotized before and it didn't quite go so well. And it's these fears and insecurities and thoughts that you're going to bring into your session. And we do this all the time with anything. So let's say you're having that session for the first time or having another session for the first time, you're giving hypnosis a go, and you're rather nervous. What would you want your hypnotist to tell you about the session? I want you to take your pen and paper, write down a bunch of things that you would want your hypnotist to tell you about the session you're about to have with them. Let me give you an example. If I was going to make a list to make it really, really simple, I would write down everything that I can that is positive. Remember the acronym, the 2 trance bubbles. I want everything that's possible in one trance that's positive and everything that's negative in another trance. Then I'm going to do everything I can to avoid the negative trance and put them in the trance that I want them to go in and I need them to go in. So what are the positive things you want your therapist or your hypnotist to tell you about the session? Would you want your hypnotist to tell you it's going to be dangerous, painful, scary, you're going to be out of control? You probably wouldn't. What you would want your hypnotist to tell you is everything positive about the session. And we can put these into different categories. The categories I want us to play with are going to be how the session will feel, what's to be almost expected of the session, and some possible outcomes. So let me give you an example of a couple that I prepared earlier, just to give you a small understanding of the list. And this will be some formal homework, if you will. You'll continually add this to your list because our priming is going to be using one of the 4 ways our unconscious mind thinks, that unconscious deals with information, which is going to be the law of association, is going to be repetition. And we're going to repeat these positive things over and over and over and over our client, or to our client when we're formally talking to them, that's going to give us our priming sequence or our priming monologue. So what are the positive things? I want to put myself in a position of seeing a client again. And let's say my client's sitting in front of me. I'm going to say something like this. Okay, Joe, now that I have formal consent, you're ready to go on hypnosis. Are you comfortable? Everything ready to go, Joe? Joe says yes. I'm going to say, Joe, well, let me give you an example of what I mean about today's session. Before we get stuck formally into how and what we're going to do today, Joe, I want you to realize one thing about today. This next couple of hours is about you. This is about your safety and your fun about going to hypnosis for the first time and learning a little bit more about yourself. Now, Joe, hypnosis has an amazing way that it feels. Clients sometimes say they feel relaxed, they feel like their mind's drifting, but all the time they're in total control and they really gain a new relationship with their unconscious mind and how they can feel different in the world. Now, I know you've come in here with a problem today, Joe, I understand that, and this is where our attention's going to go, to try and find new ways for you to think, new ways for you to act and be, Joe, all the while learning about yourself. So not only is hypnosis going to be fun today, you're going to feel relaxed and everything's going to be put into place, Joe, that you need to overcome your issue. You're going to have such fun today. It could be today that starts your new life. This is an exciting time for you, Joe. You should be very, very proud you've taken this first step in this session today. And my job is to show you how to do this, Joe, is to give you the session that you need in order to overcome your issues while feeling safe and relaxed in my presence as well. Because, Joe, you know I'm going to look after you. You know this session is going to be completely safe. And my goal here is to show you how powerful the mind can be and how much of a better person you can be, Joe, by experiencing your unconscious mind in action. That's hypnosis, Joe. It's fun, it's exciting, but it's not just about one thing you can do. Imagine gaining a better relationship with yourself or being introduced to the real Joe once and for all. So when you go out into the world, it's not just today that changes your life. You can keep changing your life every step along the way, Joe. Are you ready to get into this, Joe? And let's pause right there. So what have I done? I've spent a couple of minutes just overloading Joe with positivity. That's all I've done. Now, here's the important thing. I am not giving this to Joe as a statement, a tick and flick checklist, so to speak. I'm not asking Joe, does he want this? I'm not asking Joe, is this okay with you? The overload of this priming sequence, and it will take a while for you to learn how to do this, and I'll give you each step along the way, involves one a crucial thing. If the A is the attention, now I've said to Joe, hey, listen to me because I'm about to tell you something important, which is the priming sequence. I can then use the priming sequence to bypass the conscious mind. And it does this through repetition and also overload. Overload is a classical way to put someone into hypnosis, to bypass the conscious mind, if you will. To overload your clients with so much information, they get lost in translation, so to speak. So by overloading Joe with such positivity, a couple of things he might see in his mind and say, well, that's not for me, I don't think that'll happen. And the whole time he's conversely working with the things he doesn't want, those other bits of information, all positive in nature, are slipping into the unconscious. So let's say Joe, I can see Joe's getting lost in what I'm telling him. I'm not going to slow down so he gets them all. I'm just going to keep on talking. When I overload him with the understanding it's all positive, I want him to feel the positive from the words I'm saying. And I'll repeat that. I want him to feel the positivity from the words I'm saying, not getting into the detail what each word means and how it's going to relate to him. I'm setting up an environment. I'm setting up a positive vibe, if you will, for Joe to go into. Now, if you think back to the acronym, I'm setting up this bubble. I'm essentially saying to the unconscious mind, hey, these are all the things I want you to prepare beforehand. If you've ever seen a cooking show before, they might bake a cake and then they'll say, do you want to see one we prepared earlier? And they pull out the cake and it looks fantastic and delicious. That's what we're doing with Joe's trance bubble. We're setting up this bubble beforehand. So when Joe goes into hypnosis, that's the bubble he gets drawn to, and everything Joe needs and everything I've said from the priming is in there or better. Meaning that the unconscious mind will probably put other things in there associated to the positive words. It associates to the positive words. That's the law of association. The law of association is basically saying, if I'm using one word like exciting, the unconscious mind will find out all the other words that relate to something exciting, maybe a memory, a feeling, and adjust those to it. It associates that to it as well. That's why some people can have a meaning for one word, while others understand a word in a totally different era. This is the law of association in action. And using repetition, what can happen is all those words almost squash together and the feeling comes out. If you found yourself ever going into, let's say, a party before, and you can feel the vibe of the party when you walk in. If everyone's having a good time, they're laughing, they might be drinking some drinks, socializing, you can feel the energy of the room, so to speak. Now, I don't want to look at this metaphysically, but we've all been through that. If you've ever gone into an office setting where someone is getting told off from the work they're doing, you can feel the tension in the air. Is it because this person's either getting yelled at or getting chastised about a mistake they made? You can feel that energy without even listening to the conversation. That's what I'm doing here. I'm creating this trance bubble. I'm creating this trance environment for Joe to go into, and it's all done with positivity. So what I'd like you to do for people listening at home, get your pen and paper. I'm going to write down as many positive things as possible. A good idea to have here, and you can jump onto Google and do this, find yourself a thesaurus. You want to expand your vocabulary so you're not using the same words like exciting, fun, learn. These are all great priming tools and great priming words, but you want to expand your vocabulary so you're not saying the same thing over and over and over. So, how we do this, I want you to make one list of what hypnosis will feel like, which could be relaxing, drifting, fun, stationary, tranquil, whatever the case may be. What will happen once Joe's inside of trance, so he's going to learn about himself, he's going to feel certain things, he's going to notice certain things about himself, he's going to get a new understanding about his life and everything about that, and what could be the result of the session. He breaks through his issues, he overcomes smoking, he gets and comes to terms with his weight issues, he never has to worry about anxiety again. I want you to write as many in this list as possible because we're going to put this together for our priming sequence. Now, if you need more instruction on this, go back to the priming sequence I gave you before. Now, the question you might be asking yourself is, how long does a priming sequence go for? That's a great question to ask. I want you to hold those thoughts, if you're having them, of course, for a little bit longer, because I need to introduce you to something a little bit more important, which is the unconscious moments that'll give you the answer to that question and show you how quick you need to prime compared to how long you may need to prime with other clients. So let's stick to basics here. Get your pen and paper out, or even type this on a laptop, and I want to make those lists. You've got to make it all positive. don't do anything negative. We don't want to include anything negative because those negatives that could influence the trance bubble we want Joe to go into. So keep it extremely positive. So go ahead and do that now. You might want to pause this recording. If you're listening to this for the second time, you've already made this list, just continue on listening, or you can come back to it a little bit later. So let's look at your list a little bit more formal. Let's say you've got 15 words or 15 statements in each category. There are a few things you must put inside your priming sequence, which I did with a little example I gave you before, that are crucial to the success of your session and also your authority as an ethical hypnotist. It's so important that we include these things, and these are a must. I always would introduce my clients to this. I would always be stating these words, and I would repeat these statements over and over again, not just at the priming stage, but all the way through my interaction, even if my client has finished the session. These must include safety for your client, certain noises that could be in the same room while your client's doing a session with you, and you as a therapist have 100% attention on the client you're working with. So let's look at these a little bit more formally. Safety. I have to make sure my client knows that the session they're going to go into is going to be safe. I'm not going to make a fool out of them. I'm not going to take advantage of them. I'm not going to bring up their deepest, darkest secrets. I'm not going to make them do anything that could put them in harm's way. It's completely safe. When it comes to noise, we have to realize that although you could be living in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors around you, there are still certain noises that could come about inside your office or as a result from being outside. You might even hear random noises while you're listening to this. It's impossible to trap all those noises out. So I want to let Joe know. Let's take Joe as my formal client. I've told Joe it's going to be safe. I'm going to look after him. The session's about him. I also want to let Joe know that time to time, you may hear noises around you, Joe. You may hear certain things while I'm talking today, Joe. Don't worry about them. My attention is 100% on you, Joe. I will look after you. Don't worry about those noises. I'm here to keep you safe. I'm here to show you what hypnosis is about, Joe. And I'm here to give you the most positive outcome of your session that I can today. And that's what hypnosis is going to be about. So a little extra monologue there. I've included the safety that Joe's going to go into and have. The noises. Now, this is important. When it comes to attention, if Joe is distracted by certain noises, maybe cars going by, maybe there's certain beeping things in your office, maybe your computer beeps, or maybe you cough or you sneeze as the hypnotist, these noises, I don't want them to distract Joe. Now, distraction can happen, and what tends to occur when a client's in trance is as soon as there's a sharp, loud noise, what tends to happen is it pulls a client out of trance quickly because this is the conscious mind going back on alert. The conscious mind being the mind that looks after the unconscious mind. It's there. It's prepared to battle for the unconscious mind to keep it safe. If I'm putting client Joe into trance formally, it means that the conscious mind is away from its duties. It's not looking after Joe. That's why I need to take on the approach of looking after Joe. I almost need to be Joe's conscious mind in this place. Now, if Joe's distracted by a sharp, loud noise, the conscious mind, no matter how deep Joe is, will pull Joe directly out of trance and put him on alert because of the sound. It's basically the fight or flight, if you will. We've all had fight or flight before, where the mind goes into almost a stagnant place and you either fight the situation or you run as far away from it. At the end of the day, it's all about safety. It's keeping yourself safe. So I need to let Joe know, no matter if I cough or I sneeze or there's trucks that go by or even my alarm clock goes off, don't let it distract you, Joe. I'm here to look after you. Just worry about the things that I'm saying. And also with that, 100% looking after Joe. I want to let Joe know that as he's in hypnosis, he can just let go of everything he feels. He can let go of everything he needs because I'm there to look after him. The common theme you're probably hearing is I'm looking after Joe. And I want to make a really, really good job of that to let Joe know that whatever happens through the session, even if it starts off fantastically and it can go a little bit pear-shaped, which we'll look at later, I'm here to protect Joe. I'm here to take Joe out of trance when he needs to, but also letting Joe know that he's still in control. It's a mutual thing. It takes two to tango, so to speak. So now that I put those into place, I need to make sure I formally include them in my priming sequence. So, how do we do this? Now that you have your list, and I also want you to include the safety and the noise, and you're going to 100% look after Joe, we need to create a monologue, a speech, if you will. We can't just tick and flick the list that we have. We can't look at Joe and say, okay, Joe, today's going to be fun, safe. I'm going to look after you 100%. Don't worry about the noises. You can feel good about the session. You can drift. You can feel tranquil. This is just a checklist. I need to make a speech out of this because I'm actually going to use this speech as part of my hypnotic induction. Now, hold on to that thought. I'm going to use this speech, this hypnotic monologue, as part of my hypnotic induction. So by doing this priming sequence, I'm actually inadvertently putting Joe into hypnosis by the fact there's overload of so much information. He's going to go into what's called a natural trance because we all do it, and we'll formally look at that a little bit later. So the way I do this, I need to introduce you to something that's very classical in the hypnosis industry and also hypnosis trainings, which is called power words. Power words are words that conjunct or combine ideas together. These are common words. The four we're going to look at: and, this is going to be a little bit of a statement, this one, as soon as, because, and which means. So we've got and, as soon as, which means, and because. Doesn't matter about the order. These four words you have used inside your speech with your friends, inside your speech with your boss, with your family, whatever the case may be, because it allows us to create the basis of speech. This is important. To take away from the checklist that we could do with our priming, and we need to create this long-running speech. And this is the power words we're going to put into it. If I say to Joe, you're going to feel safe through this session and learn about yourself, I put ideas together that now is becoming a little bit of a speech. Now, this is important. So what I'm doing, all I'm doing is I'm taking those words, and if I want to combine ideas together, I'm putting one of those words or one of those statements, and it takes a little bit of practice to do this, and I'm creating this long-winded monologue. I need to overload Joe the information with the understanding that I'm priming him, I'm setting up that trance bubble for him, and including so much information that his conscious mind cannot keep up. Because remember, I need to put Joe into trance at some point. I can't do that if his conscious mind is on alert. So if I'm using my pre-talk in the wrong, or my priming talk in the wrong way, and saying to Joe, well, Joe, today's session is going to be a little bit dangerous. You're really not going to enjoy it. It's going to be terrible. You're probably going to feel a lot of pain. And you know what, Joe? This means you will not overcome your problem. And because you're not enjoying yourself today, Joe, and you're not overcoming your problem, you will probably become worse off as a person because that's the way the mind works. The mind is against you, Joe. Now, you can already hear from that. What's the common theme and the energy you're getting from that? All negative. And you could expect at this point, Joe's probably going to run out of my office and never look back. So instead, I need to do this in the positive and say things using my power words, of course. Joe, today's session is all about you. And not only do I want you to feel tranquil and feel at ease with me today, Joe, I want to let you know that I'll be looking after you 100%. Now, there may be noises around you, Joe, throughout the session. Don't worry about those. And if you don't worry about those, which means that you're actually in trance, it must be the start of something good for you, Joe. Because all change happens at an unconscious level, Joe. So my job today, Joe, is not just to look after you, is to put you in hypnosis, what we call hypnotic trance, so you can feel excited about the new life you're going to have. You can feel at ease and relax from the very sensations that you have from being in trance. And all this means, Joe, that you're making the positive change you need, Joe. This is all about learning about you, Joe. And because you're learning about you, you probably get to be introduced to the real Joe that's inside of you. And I know you have that in you, Joe. I know today is important. And that's why I'm going to put all my attention on you, Joe. This means that not only is my attention going on to you, but we can navigate to the best outcome you want from today, Joe. So again, I've taken those ideas. I'm looking at my list, if you will, and I'm using those power words to put all those lists together, put all those words and those statements together so it flows. This is your hypnotic flow. We need to put this into place because we're using this to set up Joe. Just imagine we're taking Joe to the gym and we're going to stretch him out. He needs to feel the positivity. Now, this is important to bring up. If I'm saying words like excited, feel tranquil, you feel like you're drifting, today's about you, Joe, and I don't mean it, Joe will pick up from this. My attitude will be different. You can still sound very, very bored while saying this to Joe, and it will not have the effect of the words that you want them to have. So if you want Joe to feel happy, you want Joe to feel excited, you want Joe to go into trance and experience something so wonderful that he's never experienced before, I need you to get as excited as the words you're using. If you find yourself bored when you're doing this part, the conscious mind of Joe will pick up on something. And it could be that conscious mind that goes on to alert and makes it very, very difficult to put Joe into hypnosis. And also, if you're saying these things, you may get the wrong attention as the conscious mind. You get the wrong attention and it puts a wall up, so to speak, and it's very hard to get through it as a hypnotist. However, let's say you are doing it in a very bored way, and let's say it still manages to bypass the conscious mind, you could set up a very boring trance for Joe through your tone, through your mannerisms, and through your lack of enthusiasm. So to get the most of this, try these exercises. The best way to do this is to do this out loud. Resist doing this in your head. Either task yourself a couple of minutes per day to do this, to expand your vocabulary. The goal here is to see how long you can talk without thinking. You can try it with your list first, but ultimately over time, you want to be able to drop that list. You don't want to be reading this in front of your clients because it's not conversational hypnosis about. You want to do this at a drop of a hat. It becomes the very way you speak, becomes the very way you express ideas. Power words right here and also the priming themes don't just have an effect at the start. It's the effect in the environment you set up from your session that'll drag through the entirety of your session. So the goal here is to task yourself. Start with 30 seconds. Talk out loud. Do it with your list first if you need to, just to get a feel for it. And see if you can get through that 30 seconds without umming and ahhing or thinking or running out of words. This is where expanding your vocabulary is super important. Try with 30 seconds first. Then once 30 seconds is up, task yourself for a minute. And then go on to 1.5 minutes, then go on to 2 minutes. See how long essentially you can talk, all positive, while you're feeling, while you're expressing yourself in the positive, to see how long you can talk without umming and ahhing or thinking. When you get to this stage of where you can start and stop a priming sequence without thinking, or umming and ahhing, which is just you thinking too much about what to say next, always think about the basics. What's the environment I'm trying to create? I'm trying to let Joe know that I'll look after him. I'm trying to keep it all positive. You need to act like that. And that's where the priming sequence comes into place. So that's the end of session 3. The priming sequence, just to recap, is the setup of the session you want to have. You want to set up that trance bubble, make a list of how trance will feel. What will happen when Joe's inside of trance? What will happen when Joe leaves trance? Put all these things into place. Warm Joe up. Get him excited about the trance he's about to go into. So I suggest you put these ideas into place. Practice these for maybe the next couple of minutes before you move on to the next session. And we're going to look and take the idea we've looked at so far, which is the priming, and just add something to it that'll be the actual induction itself, informally. So you can actually use the priming sequence to set up Joe and start to create a little bit of a natural trance through conversation that'll happen regardless. And we'll talk about natural and creative trances very soon. So you can actually almost kill 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will. So we're going to use the priming sequence as I set up tool and use it to slowly put Joe into a trance without him realizing it. And the way we do this, we'll do this on the next session, is through your hypnotic voice. So practice this first, then we can move on to the next stage. As you can tell already, these stages are little steps along the way. It's all going to be formally put together towards the end. All we've done so far is looked at the P stage, which is the priming sequence. And then we're going to add something to it, some nuances to this, to now look at this as a little informal induction, if you will. So practice this first, pause the recording before you move on to the next session. When you're ready, we'll see you on the next one for understanding and creating a strong hypnotic voice. See you on the next one.